Welcome. Thank you everyone very much for joining and for bearing with us in these last technical moments before starting a webinar. My name is Caroline Milne. I am the head of communications at BPIE, the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. And I'm very honored and excited to be your host and moderator for today's webinar, a Paris-proof retail property sector. And the key question that we're trying to answer today is how to reach net zero shopping spaces by 2050. I have a few more things I'd like to say on the topic before we get into it, but I'd ask Joe to kindly switch the slide and to the next slide, please. And I'd like to launch a poll right away. So using Slido, I hope it works. Basically, we're using we're using WebEx today. And you'll see on the sidebar, you'll see basically a Q&A box as well as a chat box. And you'll also see a Slido poll coming up right now. So this is good practice for everyone to get into it. So we ask you all to say today what industry you're coming from. We had many registrants for this event, but it would be great to have an idea now of who's showing up and who's in the audience today. So if you can practice using Slido on WebEx, please fill in the poll and let us know where you're coming from. You'll also see on your WebEx panel to the very bottom right corner, 3 little dots. And if you open that up, that can allow you to customize the things that you see. So if you want to see the Q&A box and focus on that or remove it, you can do that. I would suggest that you keep it up. We really want lots of questions and engagement with the audience. So please use the Q&A box, especially for your questions to all of our speakers, and when appropriate, address them to the speaker's name so that we can better, make sure that the discussion is as fruitful as possible. In the meantime, I'm not sure if people are actually filling in the poll or not, but please do. And I'm just trying to get an idea of who's in the audience. So far, I see, I'm not sure if you see it, I see that we have 58% of the audience today is coming from real estate, which is very exciting. We have 25% other, 4% is commercial retail, we have 4% financial institutions, industry associations, media communications. So really, real estate is at the top of the list. I don't see this number growing so much, and I don't want to take 56% now. It's growing, it's changing. But Joe, can we go back to the slides so we can carry on and get on with the presentations? So overall, very nice to see that we have such a high volume of real estate in the audience today. I think this webinar will definitely be useful to you. So the key question that we're trying to ask today, as I mentioned, is how can we achieve a net zero retail property sector in line with the Paris Agreement objectives? And we have a wealth of experience and expertise on the webinar. I mean, cumulatively, we have over 100 years of experience amongst all our speakers in policymaking, in energy efficiency finance and project origination, and in sustainability, retail real estate in particular, and bringing companies to becoming more sustainable. So I'm very excited. Today we'll have opening remarks from Clemens Brenningmeier, who is head of sustainable business at Redevco. Redevco is an investment management company based in the Netherlands, and Clemens has well over 20 years of experience working in retail real estate alone from the UK, Belgium, Turkey. So I'm very pleased to welcome him here. We'll then have a keynote from Stephen Moser, who will be talking to us about the policy background and why it is so relevant to be discussing this and pushing this topic forward right now. Stephen is head of unit of the coordination of the just and green energy transition at DG Energy at the European Commission. We will then have a very exciting and much awaited launch of BPIE's report from my colleague Zsolt Toth, who is senior project manager at BPIE. And BPIE, Zsolt will tell you more, I don't want to give it away. So BPIE has been working on this topic for a while. That's all I'll say. And it's exciting. It's very exciting times that he's actually bringing this out. Finally, we'll have a short Q&A, just any direct questions that you would have to Stephen or to Jolt, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion with 4 fantastic panelists. We have Guida Dentoling, who's a sustainability manager at Redevco, Simona Portigliotti, director of marketing and communications, CSR and innovation at Nhood, Louise Ellison, who is chief commercial officer at Longevity Partners, and Franco Howry, who is senior investment manager of the Energy Efficiency Fund at Aquila Capital Management. And this panel will really be about, first, the panelists will share their challenges, but particularly solutions and success stories to achieving a zero carbon retail building portfolio, and sharing their experience in really what works, because we really want to talk about practical solutions today. And then we will open up the floor with everyone to have a discussion with the audience. And finally, we will have closing remarks from Joost Komen, who is Secretary General of the European Council of Shopping Places, also known as ECSP, a young association that was founded just about a year ago in Brussels. And so without further ado, I'd ask for the next slide. And actually, we can just remove it entirely. And I would ask all the other speakers now, just turn your cameras off and let's give the full floor over to Clemens for his opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Great. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining this session. As Caroline said, my name is Clemens Brenningmeier, Head of Sustainable Business Operations at Redevco. Redevco is a pan-European investment manager in commercial real estate, focusing mostly on urban real estate, and we have a long history in specifically retail. Redevco takes its responsibility on sustainability seriously. It's been part of our agenda for more than 15 years. We've been certifying our assets using BREEAM for more than 10 years and continuously improving those assets and those ratings. And just a few years ago, we launched our own net zero campaign targeting net zero portfolio by 2040. And in fact, also just earlier this year, we have committed to setting a science-based carbon emissions reduction target by 2030 as a sort of stepping stone towards net zero. Now, this is all complicated stuff. And, you know, as a business, we also are figuring out how to do this in retail real estate together with our partners, with our tenants. And one of the things that we've found is that you know, there's a lot of research in terms of the opportunities and the benefits of making your assets more sustainable in the offices sector, but there wasn't particularly a lot of research and evidence in the retail real estate sector. And Redevco is fortunate enough to have a foundation, and the foundation has as its mission to support and accelerate initiatives that will increase the understanding of and the transition to a more sustainable, low carbon and circular built environment. And through the foundation, we got in touch with BPIE and asked whether they would support and help and drive this particular piece of research to understand, together with a broad group of players out of the retail real estate industry, what is it going to take, where are we now, and what do we need to be doing to getting to a net zero retail real estate built environment. So I'm thrilled to be able to just say, you know, thank you to BPIE for doing the work, for presenting today the result of that research. Hopefully it will be compelling, inspiring, will challenge all actors in the retail value chain to recognize that we have to do this together. But there are also great opportunities, and that ultimately it is just good business to move in this direction. And with that, I look forward to the discussion and to all the input and the Q&A from everyone on the call. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Clemens. And I'll ask Stephen Moser to join us now for his keynote presentation. And Clemens, I would just like to say it's also been really an honor to be able to work with Redevco and to get to work on a project which has been so practical and has brought us so much closer to understanding the intricacies of one specific industry. So thank you very much. And Now, Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and for the invitation to this very interesting and important event to discuss the challenges in the retail sector and the buildings linked to that. And thank you also to Clemens for the welcoming and introductory words, as well as then I'm very much looking forward to Zsolt's presentation of the report by BPIE, which is a major source of information, evidence, and inspiring further thoughts, and then of course the panel discussion. So from the Commission side, we are at a very important moment of policy development, but also already negotiations and to implement basically the Green Deal. The Green Deal tries to step up significantly the ambition level to reach a carbon neutral Europe and decarbonize our continent. And for that, we've upgraded also and made more ambitious the 2030 climate objective of 55% reductions. The building sector will be absolutely crucial in achieving that. The building sector is one of the major consumers of energy, but also sources of greenhouse gas emissions. And for that reason, we need to see how we best integrate the building sector into the overall efforts, but also link it with the different sectors relevant for the energy, climate and environment and transport system more broadly. So basically the link to sustainable transport, but also consuming and producing renewable energy to a large degree, and of course also making sure that the buildings as such used will be decarbonized, will be very energy efficient, that basically sustainability is really factored in the operation, but also construction, renovation of shopping malls, of buildings housing the retail sector. You have very large buildings, you have office buildings, but also shops under your control, which are often showcasing good practices, which are inspiring people, which are at the center of our lives, our social lives also, and there we can link that also with the greening challenge, basically bringing in good and even best practices from how we actually want to lead our lives in a more sustainable manner, to make them healthier, prettier, and more integrated in our efforts also to have a circular economy and more biodiversity in the cities. There are lots of improvements possible, and this is what people increasingly also value as something which makes it attractive to spend time. So this could be a kind of pull factor really to attract people. It is extremely important from the Commission's point of view to try to influence the agenda, but also the design and operation of the building in a proactive manner. So to see your role also as an important sector to bring in your views, but also identify any particular challenges or wishes which we can take up when it comes to designing regulations, for instance, and also financing schemes, good practices, technical assistance. That is very important to be able to exchange and firstly identify, but then also exchange good practices which could inspire us across borders, across Europe, but also across the world, and see what really can work. And our renovation wave, for instance, tries to underline the importance of a holistic agenda, really, of looking at all the different aspects relevant for building, which is indeed circularity, which is the integration into the renewable energy system. It is energy efficiency. It is also the recovery and reuse of materials to make buildings smart, digitalized, interactive with the with the broader system and the link to transport. You of course will house lots of parking places, which make it important for people to be able to recharge their cars, which increasingly become electric, to make sure that there will be sufficient bike parking places, for instance, and that this basically is that your buildings are designed in the way which people really want to use them and want to spend time in. So that is extremely relevant from our point of view. A very important issue is also finance, sustainable finance, which will increasingly channel to projects and buildings in terms of renovation, but also new construction, which are really ambitious, decarbonized, energy efficient through the taxonomy developed at European level, but also in the design of the recovery plans, the regional funds. So this will be increasingly the benchmark, finance only where there's real added value in our policy ambitions to move forward. And I think there you can also see that rather as an opportunity to develop your company's portfolio in that direction, in order to benefit the most from financing, which goes increasingly in that direction of more sustainability. What we try to address at the European level is particularly the worst performing buildings, for the very reason that we have to prioritize resources towards where it most makes sense, where it's the biggest added value. And of course, gradually over time, the worst performing buildings will move up in terms of energy performance, because we will roll up basically from behind the building stock. So it will be important for you also to make an inventory of your own portfolio to see really where first the effort should be prioritized, and then second, third, in order to maximize the impact of any action in that respect. As said, from the European side, we're trying to develop regulation in terms of better information, better evidence, better data, improve smartness, make sure that there are clear incentives, that we tackle the worst performing buildings primarily, but also make sure that sustainable finance will be more and more upgraded and be more specific for the buildings where it really makes sense in terms of renovations. And I think I mentioned the renovation wave as a holistic agenda. There we also try to integrate safety, security, and accessibility. These are important aspects to make sure that when we touch a building in terms of opening it up and improving it, that we think about all aspects, that nothing is forgotten, which would later on be regretted if we have forgotten it, because you can't do a renovation and then say, oh, sorry, I forgot something, let's open it up again. So that is not possible. So this is really a call on you to really look at all the aspects right from the start, do a strategic plan for your buildings, and then work along these lines. So with that, I would like to indeed at this moment thank you very much for the attention. And of course, in the panel, we can have a more specific look at the different regulations, which is of course the Energy Efficiency Directive, Renewable Energy Directive, the Emission Trading Scheme, but also the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, and all the finance related aspects, and of course the broader agenda which we have from the EU side. So thank you very much for the attention. Look very much forward.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It was great to hear from you, and we'll definitely hear more from you shortly, I imagine, in the Q&A, which reminds me, I'm not seeing many questions from our audience just yet, so I would really encourage you all to think about what you would like to ask, because there will be a moment after Jolt's presentation shortly where you can put your questions to both Stephen and Jolt. So please start putting your questions in the chat, in the Q&A box now, and we will get to them after the next presentation. So Jolt, I would invite you to come and join us now and present this great report that you have been working on tirelessly for the past months.
Thank you, Caroline, and good morning and welcome to everyone. Also from my side, I'm really pleased to speak after Clemens and Stefan today, and I just wanted to start with reversing the kind introductory notes of Clemens, because indeed this webinar is the culmination of more than a year and a half of close engagements with the retail real estate sector. And as he rightly noted, most of the existing research and discussion on decarbonization and carbon neutrality has been focusing on the office real estate sector. And the retail real estate sector has been somewhat a blind spot. And it's also, I think, very important that it's not just a blind spot in terms of existing research, but also in terms of getting the attention of the policymakers, because what we are struggling here in terms of decarbonization is quite specific and is quite particular to this sector. So I just have a couple of introductory notes about BPIE, if I can have the next slide, please. Right, so we are an independent think tank and repository of policy expertise related to the built environment. Traditionally, we have been focusing on energy efficiency, energy performance of buildings, but over the last 2 years, we have expanded the scope of our activity to cover the whole life cycle of the built environment, because even though this discussion today is about carbon neutrality, I think we are going to see that this is linked to a wider environmental and social agenda. So we exist for over 10 years now, and we are based in Brussels and Berlin. And in one word, our mission is to decarbonize the built environment. And it's very clear that the retail real estate sector is playing a very important role in achieving this goal. So therefore, it was a very good fit and one of our core interests to engage in this project. Can I have the next slide, please? All right. Now, most of the similar events or reports on carbon neutrality, they usually start with a very dire picture about the urgency of climate action. But I thought that it would be more appropriate actually to start with a recognition that there are already very ambitious commitments from the leading retail real estate sectors. And these carbon neutrality commitments, they show actually that there is an awareness, and there is a concrete awareness about how to deal with this topic. What is in fact is missing, there are two main critical gaps, and this is where this initiative is going to fall into. One of the issues is that despite the fact that we have ambitious pledges in place, we have also diversity in the way how these targets are being defined. And that actually leads to a concern that these pledges are not really comparable. And for the general public, for policymakers, investors, it simply is very difficult to navigate and properly just understand what is behind these targets. And that actually leads to the second issue that we have currently with these carbon commitments, is that there is still a bit of unclarity of what concrete actions and how these targets will be actually implemented, how these targets will be followed up upon. So therefore, it's very important to gain the credibility and to send out a trustworthy signal to the public generally. And therefore, we have this outline of a common vision. If I can have the next slide, please. Which sends out a very strong signal to the public that the retail real estate sector is ready and is engaging with this topic. And it's very important that the retail real estate sector is coming together and collectively articulate what would be the next steps to deliver and to incentivize long-term action. And this is not, as I just said, this is not just about achieving climate goals, but this is also about creating the right sort of the sustainable places and the more responsible customer and shopping environment. Can I have the next slide, please? Right, so now let's look at just what do we mean by net zero carbon, because a number of market initiatives are actually providing a guiding framework for the real estate sector to actually get on and build a strategy of how to reach net zero carbon. And what we have here, the hierarchy of these priority lists, essentially of focusing on efficiency gains first, reducing the consumption concomitantly with improving the renewable energy capacity, is very important. And this you see on the left-hand side of the picture is very much aligned also with our own analysis, where the most of the gains are. Now, because we are talking about real estate, and more specifically retail real estate, we can't get to absolute zero carbon. So there are always some residual emissions remaining. And now it's very important of these residual emissions are being removed from the atmosphere. And there has been quite a lot of discussions recently over what sort of measures would qualify as a reliable and credible offsetting. So in these documents, we set out clear requirements of what would qualify for this, and importantly, those measures which will essentially remove the remaining carbon, because that in very short, the definition of net zero, this is actually what it means, is that a company or a building on average puts no more emission into the atmosphere and is not going to deplete the remaining carbon budget that we have until 2050. Can I have the next slide, please? Right, so in this strategy and vision document, which will go live this afternoon, we are going to describe a number of priority actions over a set of timelines. So essentially, we will have a roadmap of clear actions, and not just for the retail industry, but also actions for policymakers, financial institutions, and generally for the construction sector, because it's very clear that the retail real estate sector cannot do this alone. And I will only highlight, because we have a limited amount of time, I will probably only focus now on the policy measures, making use also of the opportunity that we have Stefan with us, so he can hear these as a sort of, request or demands from the retail industry itself. If I can have the next slide. So a lot of these have been already mentioned by Stefan himself, but it's clear that, can I have the next slide, please? Because that's actually the policy measures, yeah. So a lot of these have been mentioned by Stefan, and it's clear that some of the building blocks of the current energy efficiency and environmental policy landscape is being built on energy performance certificates and requirements for new buildings. Now, what is very important to bridge this with the agenda of carbon neutrality and the decarbonized built environment, and these are the tools which are simply the most available today to the market. But for this to be able to work, to fulfill the role as being proxies, for instance, for underwriting financial investments or for assessing risks, to make sure that we the industry is able to track progress and just making sure that the NZAB and the EPCs are aligned with carbon neutrality goals is very important, that these are gradually then converging. So the APCs and the NZABs are gradually converging towards these carbon neutrality goals. And it's also very important to have a better overview of actually what does it mean, decarbonization means for the entire European building stock, and then specifically for the various sectors that we have within the building stock, because that would be very important then for the retail real estate actors to be able to come up with their individual strategies for their own portfolios and for their own assets. Now, a specific issue for the retail real estate sector is about split incentives related to landlords and the tenants. And one specific issue is about the way how data is being collected. The data is being shared, which we all know is extremely important, and it's really just a starting point for the industry to be able to assess where they are, to be able to set targets, and to be able then to follow up the strategy. So that is a particular area that would require a bit of clarification and maybe policy intervention, just to make sure that the data is more readily available and the incentives around the data collection and data sharing are properly aligned. And finally, I think Stefan has mentioned that minimum mandatory requirements will be very important as driving the worst performing parts of the building sector. If I can just have the next slide, then we will see this all in, because arguably the two most important legislative provisions that are going to drive the decarbonization agenda will be the taxonomy, the sustainable finance taxonomy, as well as the minimum energy performance standards. And these are probably the two policy measures that the industry is most aware of. And we see that the taxonomy is going to reward, is designed to reward the best in class. And that's very important for the sector, because it simply sends out a very clear signal of where they need to be. And finance is going to increasingly being tied to these requirements. Simply, if you have a taxonomy alignment, you will have financing available, or available at a more preferential condition. And if not, it may be more expensive to get, or ultimately it will be maybe even impossible to get. And that's somehow a tendency that we are going to see increasingly as the financial sector is going to disclose their green asset ratios, and they are going to be incentivized to lend more against high performance or carbon neutral assets. And so from the bottom, we see that the minimum energy performance standards are going to drive those assets which are falling behind the curve. So in between the two is actually where the smooth decarbonization pathway for the sector is going to happen. Can I have the next slide, please? Right, so as for the industry itself, this is still a bit about arguing and making the business case, because climate alignment and investment in carbon neutrality will certainly come with a cost. And it's very important also to properly articulate the benefits. Now, there has been quite a lot of discussion over the last maybe even 2 decades of how green buildings are adding value. I don't really want to delve on this question, but I think what is very important is that when actually setting up the buildings and the portfolios of buildings on a climate neutrality roadmap, is also very important to focus on all these other sustainability or green building features and credentials. So to explicitly target these other features, coupled together with the energy efficiency and low carbon measures, because these potentially have a very high chance of driving the value. And then what you see here is actually how these various green building features and credentials can translate, you see here the impact chain and how this can translate into a value addition and financial data and ultimately financial performance. So it's very important to track these potentially green or positive building features. It's very important to communicate this in an explicit way, because then we'll have a higher chance that these are being more available and more readily able to drive also the financial bottom line. Can I have the last slide, please? And finally, a few concluding thoughts, because we were just talking about the costs and the benefits. It's very important that these are being shared across in an equitable way across stakeholders, especially in between the landlords and the tenants. And it's very important then when the landlords are drawing up these carbon neutrality strategies, then the tenant is being engaged and their interests and their needs are being captured and aligned. Now, that also requires certain skills and capacity, anticipating future skills especially, when it comes to empowering the asset managers to engage in conversations with the tenants, to be able to, for asset managers, to be able to properly measure and track whole life carbon emissions, to manage ESG risks. And generally, we see also that there is a big discrepancy between the big real estate firms as well as the small ones in terms of skills and capacity. And this vision and strategy document is important actually for everyone. It's important for taking everyone, to taking the entire sector with us. And so finally, this is not just about managing climate or carbon related risks. Now, this has been, of course, carbon risks have been a very important entry point, essentially to start a conversation in the finance sector and the real estate sector. And stranded assets have been the obvious concern for these stakeholders, but divesting from the buildings or the assets which do not meet climate neutrality goals, that in itself is really not helping this agenda. What is very important is to actively target positive climate outcomes. And as I said, this is not just about carbon. It's very important to focus on all the other environmental and social benefits. And it's really, I think, engaging with this issue is an opportunity for the sector to rebuild a more resilient retail real estate industry, and an industry which is then, creates healthy buildings and is sort of meeting or anticipating the needs of the users and the society at large. And I will stop here, and I just thank you for your attention, and I hope we have enough then for the panel to discuss this in detail. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much, Zsolt. I'm back after a great kickoff presentation for the vision and strategy document. I have a couple questions for both you and Stephen Moser. They're my own questions, just a few basic ones I think might be interesting for the audience. I have not seen any audience questions come in yet, so please don't forget to put your questions through the Q&A. Don't be shy. Zsolt, I'd first just like to ask you if you can explain a bit how you came to building this strategy and what it was like to engage with retail real estate. Do you see who were you engaging with? How did it work? And do you see that, based on your sample, that this industry is ready to become Paris-proof, so to speak? Do you see the willpower there?
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. First of all, I think it was really a very pleasant experience, and I'm very grateful for the leadership of couple of retail real estate sector stakeholders and representatives, and I'm also very grateful for the sustainability working group of ECSP that Joost is chairing, and he will speak a bit later on. So that sort of provided us great insights into what is the status quo, what is the starting point, what the key issues are. And so these considerations have been captured in our previous publication, which documented these issues, and I just mentioned here the key policy issues, but also market initiatives related to disclosures, how to set up targets against SBTI or other available frameworks. So essentially, we started off with a mapping of what is the existing practice. So for them to discuss and develop together this vision and essentially what needs to be done within not just the next 2 or 5 years, but over the long term, that would lead to a more credible decarbonization in the sector.
Thank you. So it sounds like, I mean, from what I've seen, that you've had a very good sampling and a very good insight that surprisingly not a lot of experts in the building sector have so far. And I think I can speak also on behalf of BPIE that this is very new to us as an organization. As a think tank, we've been working on buildings policy for a long time, but haven't actually accessed so many players that are really on the ground doing the work. And I think that we still have seen maybe a gap between policy and the industry. And so, yeah, hence why we're here, because we want to support in closing that gap. And so my next question would be for Stephen Moser, and it's maybe a two-part question. I would ask you if you can explain to our audience a little bit. I think you and Joel both touched on all of the upcoming measures. We have minimum energy performance standards. We're talking about stricter NZEB rules. How can you explain a bit more in detail what the opportunities are actually for this industry to engage in this process, and maybe where you think this industry might be most affected? What is the most relevant for them to know? And sorry, I have a three-part question. What is the most relevant? And also, have you had much engagement so far from retail real estate? So yeah, have you had much engagement? What is most relevant and for them, and what are the opportunities that for them now to maybe activate and for both the policy side and the retail real estate side to come closer together?
Thanks a lot, Caroline and Joel, again for this extremely interesting report. So I think the opportunities for the retail sector are on the one hand economic, because it affects the value of property. In the future, value will more and more depend on the energy and climate performance of a building, in terms of simply value when you would like to sell, for instance, but also in terms of attractiveness for consumers to actually go there and spend time there. So as a factor, convincing people that they should do the shopping on the spot and instead of just online, for instance, or in other ways, or going elsewhere. So I think this is an economic decision in the first place. Of course, in the second place, I would say it is also your role in society as major parts of public life, or I would say elements of and factors of public life. It's large visible buildings, it's big complexes. It's a bit like little villages or even a little city often, if it's a large retail complex, where you can, in some ways, like in an energy community, really go for integrated solutions. So where it really makes sense to have strategic planning in terms of how to best generate, consume renewable energy, how to link with the transport sector, recharging infrastructure, how to green, how to create also space for biodiversity. So and of course also circularity in terms of operating the building, waste management, but also the components of the building. So it is very much a huge opportunity to develop and use also good practices observed elsewhere in other retail complexes like shopping malls, but even in villages, in districts, in cities, because this is bringing together lots of shops, for instance, which have, of course, a very high energy consumption, but also waste production and water consumption. So I think it's worthwhile doing the effort to have a strategic planning here. So and then of course you can also use the opportunities more and more so to draw on more attractive financing and even promotional financing, subsidies available for green investments. So that is also, I think, increasingly a need for your sector to engage in. And the more you do that proactively, the more you actually see that as a kind of interesting opportunity, as a kind of positive factor, the more you can shape the agenda and also bring in your ideas, your concerns. Otherwise, you would rather be confronted with decisions having been made and you simply have to adjust to them. So that is also the reason why it's important to engage in policy development, but also in dialogue with the authorities at the national and regional and local level, so that they know your concerns, how you, for instance, can link to the broader local energy system, notably in terms of renewable energy, how you can improve the energy performance, energy efficiency of your buildings, and what can, for instance, the municipal authorities do to help you, and how you can bring forward your points of view. So I think also good practices can be factored in the one-stop shops which are being established, which are existing already, but which will be further developed, so that basically you can bring in your good practices, but also learn from others elsewhere. So this basically is an invitation and even an appeal to engage in dialogue. We have had, of course, engagement from your sector, but I would share the impression that you are not one of the typical sectors which has engaged so far. I think the focus has been on certain types of buildings, like as Joel said, offices, hospitals, schools, so the public buildings really. But it is true that we have, to some extent, forgotten to highlight very important large buildings, such as shopping malls, for instance, which are across the world, across Europe, but also across the world, a major part of our built environment, and also have a very high importance in our daily lives.
Thank you very much. And I see we actually have a lot of questions now. They are coming in through different areas. So I have one on, just give me a sec as I was reading through several of them. I have one question specifically on data and sharing data consumption, actually. So this is an anonymous question, but a key problem they're facing now is getting retailers, so their tenants, to share their data on consumptions. I don't know, do you have any incentives that you have in mind, or anything that could maybe support this eventually on the policy side?
Well, data management will be a crucial factor. We need to build our decisions, investment decisions, but also policy decisions and planning decisions on the quality of data. So it is, I would even compare a shopping mall with, let's say, there's one owner and multi-occupancy in terms of tenants. Yeah? So to a multi-apartment building, yeah, which is a typical one, which has been one of the focus areas really of the effort so far. You have basically a relatively high number of tenants, yeah, so can be private people or shop owners who need to engage with the broader community in the building, the owner of the overall complex, but also the other tenants, in a way of making sure that the data will be protected in the sense of private aspects not being disclosed, but aggregated nonetheless, in order to steer and improve the overall management of the building. And I think there indeed there are all the efforts being made on smartness of buildings, of interaction, of active consumers, prosumers. I mean, a shop owner, of course, who is a tenant, would not be for him or herself be a producer of renewable energy. That's clear, but he or she could, of course, show interest in contributing and taking up the renewable energy which is produced for the larger building, and basically make also sure that there will be a certain reactivity and readiness to react to prices, that you can basically try to make your energy demand as flexible as possible and react to prices depending on whether energy is available abundantly, or actually whether there's currently scarcity. So this would actually require the use and installation of smart appliances, and simply awareness and willingness to somehow engage in the broader management of the building, which is a bit like a village, like a district, like a neighborhood, I would say. Yeah? So there's a lot of parallels to be drawn from that. And I think also good practices from energy communities, how they are run. So this, I think, would be very similar and comparable, and a lot of insights could be exchanged also between the two.
Thank you very much. I really like the point about comparing a building, an apartment or a shopping mall, for example, to an energy community. I have many more questions that have come in now, but in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to the panel discussion, and I'm keeping note of some of these, so hopefully towards the end we can come back to them and address them with everyone involved. So thank you very much, Stephen and Zsolt, for your interventions. And I will, before we go on to the panel, actually, I would invite everyone to do another quick Q&A to get ready for this panel. And really based on some of the, maybe just to see your own experience. Many of you are working in retail real estate already, and you've also just heard some very interesting interventions from our two first speakers here. So what do you think, based on your experience, the biggest challenge is to decarbonizing the retail real estate sector? And I think this will be a great warm-up for the panel, who is now going to be talking about solutions that they've been implementing. So please take a moment to share your thoughts. I am so far seeing all of the above. All of the challenges seem very important. And it's slightly changing. If you can see it, I hope you can all see it in real time. So far, we have all of the above. So everything is a big challenge. But we also have balancing long-term goals of decarbonization, which take time, against the norm of short-term planning, which I think is very interesting. And we'll hear more about that from our speakers. And then the split incentives is quite close. And the last two don't seem to be as big of an issue. I see people are still filling in the poll. Overall, all of the challenges seem to be the number one issue, and again, the long-term goals. So I think this is really interesting for our panelists, who I would now invite to all come onto the floor. And I've had some questions as well. Yes, the slides will be sent ex post to participants, and we're also recording this. If you missed the first few minutes, we're recording. We'll send the slides and recording, as well as our new publication after this webinar. And in the meantime, I would just like to say a few words about our panelists before we get started and explain to you a bit what we're going to do. So each expert on the panel today will be speaking just for 5 minutes and talking specifically about their experience and solutions they have been working on implementing to decarbonize their commercial building portfolios. So we have Guido Dentoling, I mentioned already, who is Sustainability Manager at Redevco, and he has a wealth of experience, especially in building certification schemes. Simona Partigliotti, Director of Marketing, Communications, CSR, and Innovation at Nhood. She's been in this position for a number of years already and has over 16 years in marketing and leading brands and working on also sustainability issues. And she really led the development, from what I understand, of Nhood's focus on sustainability, and their positioning. We have Franco Haury, who is not actually a retail investment manager. Rather, he is a senior investment manager at Aquila Capital. He is leading their energy efficiency fund. So his fund actually looks to invest into projects, and he is interested and has experience in working in the shopping and helping actually originate and build the projects for shopping centers and other commercial buildings. So I think that it'll be a really interesting perspective to get that finance side. And finally, we have Louise Ellison, who is Chief Commercial Officer at Longevity Partners. She is freshly new to this job, but before that, she was over 8 years at Hammerson, who is a UK-based real estate management company. She is, I think, now the chair of the EPRA Sustainability Committee. Previously, she was leading the Better Buildings Partnership in the UK. She has a wealth of experience. We are really privileged, I think, to have such a great panel today. So without further ado, Guido, I would let you take the floor because your pitching is first. So please go ahead, and I'm moving you to the stage so we can have a close-up of you. And Yes, and I will also remove myself, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Thanks all for joining. Guido den Toling, as said, Sustainability Manager at Redevco, same company that Clemens works for. So we're a real estate investment manager, predominantly focusing on retail real estate, but we are really focusing on urban environments. We've been doing a lot as related to sustainability over the past 20 years, and it comes with lots of challenges. And I think 5 minutes is probably a bit too short to tell about the challenges, but also about opportunities and good projects that have resulted in real success. I think some of the key challenges that we faced, and I think it comes really through in the reporting as well, is the tenant-landlord relationship, and specifically focusing on that split incentive. It's not always difficult, or not always easy to actually do things that not necessarily benefit you immediately, and it's always challenging to find the good solutions that actually create win-win relationships. So tenant relationships are very important and are, I think, instrumental to getting things done. I think other challenges also relate to data sharing. Data sharing is key. Without the data, we don't know where we are, where we need to go to, and how we can improve our assets. I think having data and being able to share it in a transparent way is very, very important. And I think a third challenge that we also see is related to valuation of assets. Like sustainable assets, and I'm talking about retail now specifically, it doesn't always come through in the valuation that they're actually better assets and more investable assets and have a greater value in that sense. And we'd like to see that differently. We'd like to see valuation actually picking up on very important sustainability topics that are key to get to a Paris-proof environment. Now, some examples of where we've had success. We've actually implemented a Mission 2040, where we say we want to be net zero carbon in 2040. Key to that is also getting off the fossil fuels for heating and for energy generation. And we've had an existing asset in Eindhoven that we actually disconnected from the natural gas grid. And we actually got different and more tenants on board. So we don't only have a clothing shop, but we also have some food and beverage stores there. So it's really good to see that you have a challenge, you face it, getting off the natural gas, and then getting tenants on board to actually do the right thing and making sure that they can deliver what they need to deliver in an all-electric environment. Another good example, I think, is our solar project, where in Belgium we're putting lots of solar panels on our roofs. I think we had good success also connecting with tenants. Tenants really getting enthusiastic about it, coming on board and wanting to be part of that project as well. So there are successes, but I think the key thing in getting successful things off the ground is getting a good tenant relationship and getting early and good buy-in from a tenant as well. So that's been hopefully about 5 minutes.
Thank you, Guido, very much. I'd welcome Franco now to come to the floor and tell us your experience as a fund actually trying to invest in projects like this. You can just turn your video on. There you are.
Yes, hi, Caroline. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion, which, as you mentioned in the introduction, is not necessarily my natural context I'm operating in. As anticipated, I'm a senior investment manager with Aquila Capital. Aquila Capital is a pan-European asset manager, headquartered in Hamburg with a pan-European presence. We manage 13 billion invested in what we call real assets, which range from renewable energy asset to green logistic asset to the topic which I'm covering, which are energy efficiency projects. We have a fund basically financing energy efficiency measures with industrial and commercial clients, as well as the public administration. And we do that by working what I call the virtuous triangle, which consists of the project developer, which is typically an engineering firm, an energy service company, or a technology supplier such as Siemens or Johnson Controls and so on, which basically approach the client, could be a shopping mall, and based on an energy audit, on an analysis of the energy consumption of the client, identify several measures which could lead to a reduction in energy consumption, a reduction ranging between 30 to 50 to 60%, depending obviously on the status of the assets. Energy efficiency measure, which can include, as has been pointed in the presentation, installation of LED lighting, installation of more efficient HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, solar PV in self-consumption on the roofs or in the car parks, smart building management system, artificial intelligence-based software solution for the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. So all proven technologies which are out there available in the market and which can significantly contribute to reduce energy consumption. And wherever the client is not interested in using its financial resources to make one or more of these energy efficiency measure happen, the project developers or the ESCO, the technology supplier, will approach us and ask to structure a financial proposal, a medium to long-term investment. Typically, we are looking at tenors ranging from 5 to up to 15 years, where we are basically helping to provide, we are providing the financial resources to implement these energy efficiency measures, and they're going to share the saving which the client is going to achieve through these energy efficiency measures. So we are basically repaying our investment through a percentage of the saving which the client is able to achieve. So the client doesn't have to use its own financial resources, will immediately reduce its energy cost. It may be 10%, it may be 20%, it may be 30%. And we will be able to basically recover our investment over the medium to the long term, depending on the mix of solutions which are going to be implemented. We have done for different clients, ranging from a shopping mall where we are working at this moment on a smaller project. We have done projects for office buildings. We have done projects for industrial clients. And I guess the big benefit I see in working in this virtuous triangle is definitely that beside being able to reduce the operating expenses by reducing energy consumption, which is becoming more relevant these days, where energy costs are increasing by 50, 60, 70%. And that's something which we will see in the invoices coming through starting Q1, Q2 next year, when the current energy supply purchase agreement will expire. So besides reducing, obviously, operating expenses, we definitely see some top line benefits as well. So making the environment, the shopping experience of the customer more positive by having better lighting, better air quality, improved perceived temperature. We see the possibility to push and promote the green message, so a strong marketing tool which can be used in order to generate value. And as it has been already pointed out, obviously, by having a more efficient building, you are more attractive for potential tenants, which may be more willing to move into the shopping mall, and basically you're increasing the value of the underlying asset.
Thank you, Franco. Sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there so we can keep going, but we definitely have some great questions for you following the rest of the panelists. I think it's a very interesting model that you're proposing and an option that can be used by a lot of commercial buildings, but I do have some questions for you that we'll get into shortly. Can I invite Louise to the stage, please?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. As Caroline said, my name is Louise Ellison. I currently work for Longevity Partners, who I joined about a month ago. And prior to that, I was at Hamson for about 8 years. I've been working in real estate all my career and started really looking at sustainability probably about 20 years ago, doing some work looking at the potential impacts that sustainability was going to have or would be likely to have on commercial property investment valuations, and particularly assessments of commercial property worth. So I've spent a long time thinking about all of these things, and then delivering strategy and projects for a number of different businesses. And hopefully now working with a lot of different clients to bring some of that experience to bear on their businesses and their portfolios and help them with that. In terms of the discussion today, obviously Hammerson is I've spent a lot of the sort of last few years focusing specifically around retail and trying to deal with some of the retail challenges. We've talked quite a bit about data this morning and the issues around data sharing, so I'm not going to dwell too long on that, and we can probably come back to it in some of the questions. But suffice to say, data management and data platforms are absolutely essential if you're really going to develop a sensible strategy around moving your portfolio to a position where it's responding to climate change properly, and you've got resilience and it remains investable. And I do mean, that those data platforms, they have to be able to provide you with information. I see so many kind of data platforms which are, going to provide you with huge amounts of data from an asset, but actually in terms of usable data, that me as a person trying to kind of drive targets and drive change can use, they don't necessarily ask the questions that we need answering. So data is a big issue. But in other areas, I mean, I'm a big believer in process, and I think at Hammerson we launched net positive targets back in 2016, which were essentially net zero targets, but kind of going a little bit further in trying to get to a net positive position. And we included not just carbon, but that's carbon, water, resource use, and our social impacts. So there were big targets to be set back in 2016, but we had a very strong data platform from which to do it. And I've specifically had very strong buy-in from senior leadership teams in the business. Once we set those targets, then the whole business was very much behind it. And I think that's critical to be able to deliver this. You need the business as a whole needs to understand why it's doing something, what it is that it's doing, and then needs to work not just. And we've talked quite a lot about retailer engagements, and I'm sure that will come back. But really talking to your internal teams, that they understand what they've got to do and are sufficiently skilled to be able to do it. So making sure that they get trained to be able to actually talk to their stakeholders and their clients in order to be able to deliver this. But also particularly talking to the supply chain. And at Hammerson, obviously, we were doing development and asset management. So there's all of the conversations you have to have with right down to the facilities management people and the property people, who tend to get forgotten in a lot of this, but they are the ones who are having to deliver this for us. So really understanding what their processes are and enabling them and pushing them in some instances not to come back with the business as usual is where we need to be, but actually coming up with changes and incentivizing them to do that, and making sure that they understand that that's what you expect as a client from your contractors. And the same on the development side. We've obviously come a long way in terms of being able to deliver buildings that hit BREEAM targets and LEED targets and all sorts of things in terms of new construction. But actually, how do those buildings operate during their life cycle and during the whole kind of operating period of that building? We need to get much better at that. And we've it's starting to ask questions of design teams around that, I think, is really important. Talking a little bit, so there's a whole kind of process piece. Then just to sort of bring it back to some of the discussions around policy. Policy is hugely important for us, and a massive kind of driver of good and a driver of change. And we've seen that a lot, particularly in the UK, with minimum energy efficiency standards, and that has got a lot of kind of asset manager focus, which we didn't have before. So that's been very helpful, but it's also that there can be, you have to kind of avoid the unintended consequences. And I think I would again sort of echo what Stephen was talking about earlier in terms of making sure the industry really engages with policymakers to make sure that we get policy that works. Because otherwise policy, it kind of falls by the wayside. We find ways around it. It doesn't kind of it doesn't achieve its ambitions. And there can be quite a lot of kind of conflicts. At the moment, one of the things that keeps coming up is whether some of the policies are actually driving us to demolish and redevelop rather than improve buildings. The embodied carbon that's existing within buildings at the moment isn't really properly valued currently. We need to get to a point where we can actually assess that within a project so that we are driven to retain buildings and retain parts of structure rather than redevelop. So yeah, that's kind of a short kind of piece on some of the policy drivers, I think, and where we need to go, and also some of the areas where I think you need to focus if you're going to get success around some of this stuff.
Thank you so much, Louise. And I have definitely more questions, follow up from you. You've, I think, opened a few interesting topics. Can I invite Simona Partigliati now to come to the floor? You just need to turn on your camera.
Yep.
And there we go.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. I represent here today Nhood, and differently from the other people, I cannot say I'm working in the CSR environment for such a long time, but I strongly decided to do that because I've always been charged for marketing, communication, and innovation, and in the last years, I strongly decided to take care of this important topic in my company. My company, Nhood, is an international real estate operator active in 10 European countries, managing 8 billion of property assets. So we have more than 300 commercial assets, 1,000 residential units, and more than 100,000 square meters of offices, and a lot of square meters of leisure and services. So we are now specialized in mixed-use real estate consultancies and urban regeneration. So from a past of a retail real estate, only retail real estate company, we are now really a mixed-use real estate company. This is why for me it's so important to understand and to make a big change in the way we do things. It's not I'm speaking as Nhood, and for all of us, the new focus is really to transform both our assets, but most of all our mindset. Because for me and for us, what really is disruptive is and must be the change of approach in all the projects, both in the existing sites and transforming. The focus must be transform the existing sites and creating a responsibility, a commitment done together, landlord and tenants, and to find a way to go in a maybe with different paths, but to go towards the same goal. This is the focus. We have strong sustainability commitment, fully based on the European carbon neutrality, of course. And to reach these really high goals, we absolutely need to start from the scratch and to change the way, not only the way in which we build the buildings, the assets, but in the way, changing the way in which we manage people, we manage processes, and we are doing a lot of work in changing the processes. Then the building is quite a consequence. Our main focus is now to transform all of our assets into something which generates a triple positive impact. But this is not new. Everyone is saying the same thing. What does it mean for Nhood? This is to transform commercial assets into places of service and culture. So provide users with as many opportunities as possible to get together and to have services and fulfillment of their daily needs in the proximity of their houses. This is what we are doing concretely. And it is quite simple because it's never simple in the development projects. So if we speak of future, for example, we are working on a great project which is Loreto Open Community, which is the refurbishment, the complete recreation of Piazzale Loreto in Milan, one of the most important traffic square in one of the big city, the most important city of Italy. There we have a lot of points, concrete points in which our goal is concretely down to earth. But if we speak about the common sites we manage from the 90s, there is really the disruptive approach we need to implement. And all the people now, we are doing a lot in creating internal culture. Every month we speak with people, both in our inside our company and in all the assets we manage, and we create new work project, new teamwork on each single argument topic. And this is the way in which we want not only the governance, and so the directors, but also every kind of people in the company be committed on the projects. And we concretely reward the people who create some results, from small results to huge ones, such as a new development project. Just to be again concrete, we have one project which is Merlata Mall in the northeast of Milan, which is the how can I say, the link between our past, so retail, real estate, commercial malls, and the future reorganization and refurbishment of the suburbs. Merlata Mall will be absolutely a mall, but in there everything is reasoned and designed to be completely to go completely towards the carbon zero neutrality. And just to give some example, all the buildings are totally harmonious and designed in accord to the environment and with eco-sustainable materials and solutions, very advanced and innovative solutions with high thermal light and acoustic comfort, with an efficient and renewable energy sources, just to minimize the electricity consumption and reduce CO2. Then we are studying, and we are already implementing, the mall will be finished in 2023, but we are already implementing advanced system for the reduction of electrical energy consumption. And also the design solutions are studied to have a positive impact, not neutral, but a positive impact. We are trying as much as possible to promote the waste and the recycled materials, the waste recycle and the materials recycle. But not only us, we have important clause in the contracts with tenants to be sure that all our efforts are implemented also by the tenants. This is, I would speak a lot about this project because what we are doing is trying to co-construct a positive impact project together with our partners, not more landlord and tenants, but partners on the sustainability goals path.
Thank you, Simona. Wow.
Stop here because I would like to go on, but I really want to.
You might be able
listen
to. I'd love to invite all of our panelists and speakers now to join the floor. Unfortunately, our Q&A time is getting cut short because I didn't want to interrupt some of these really great insights, and I think that some of you have already answered some questions already. But I'd like to start with one of the first ones that we got, and then Simona, you definitely touched on this, but maybe I would be interested in hearing some other viewpoints. And Simona, please put your camera back on. We still would love to see your face and have as many people on the stage, on the virtual stage as possible. So I think one of the first questions that is so pertinent is, what are your main experiences with acquiring tenant buy-in? And how do you convince retailers to care about real estate? So it's kind of a two-part question. And the comment says that the proportion of carbon emissions coming from the shops is very low compared to what goes into production and transport, or is it? So can you maybe talk a little bit about I would ask yourself or Louise or Guido, maybe you can speak a bit more about the landlord-tenant relationship and how you convince tenants to care.
It's long been a challenge, obviously, and the point that was made, I saw in the question in the chat, is a really important one. On the one hand, we have relationships with tenants. It has always tended to be a pretty commercial relationship. So getting it out of the commercial space and having a dialogue about the alignment of your plans around sustainability and the importance of it is one area. I've certainly found in the last 18 months to 2 years that tenants have become much more willing to engage on this. And simply provide data and have conversations about it. They're getting much more with the programme on it, and seeing it more as something that's mutually compatible rather than something that is simply being very kind of skeptical about why we might be wanting to have a conversation. Because at the end of the day, if we're setting standards and helping them to improve the efficiency of a building or of their stores, it just goes to their bottom line. It's just really helpful. The other point that was made, and it doesn't mean it's easy. A lot of the time the conversation starts with leasing, but that's really just an opening the door and setting the tone of the conversation, because it's hard to get somebody to share anything with you when you're waving a lease at them. It really needs to be about a more in-depth dialogue than that, and between the relevant parties within the businesses who understand what they're doing and really kind of understand the requirements around sustainability. And we have had a lot of success with that. Hammerson had a lot of success with that. Really just talking to the tenants when there was some skepticism about how they were going to hit out standards, those kinds of things. Once you explain stuff to them, they realise that actually they're doing a lot of that stuff anyway, and they're not going that much further. And talking to their fit out teams and their project management teams, expecting them to actually raise their game a little bit is good for the tenants as it is for us. So there is a lot that you can do. The bigger issue, I think, is the one raised about the fact that there is less less carbon emissions in the real estate portfolios of particularly the bigger retailers than there are in their supply chains. So we have traditionally, the sector has been quite less of an issue. It's been less of a focus naturally for those businesses, because they're looking at all of their shipping and logistics costs and just the manufacturing costs and things, which are way bigger than what's in their stores. So we have to find a way of avoiding those bigger companies' policies being around just we can offset what's in the real estate portfolio, because that's a real danger. And one of the things I would look to Stephen on this, because one of the ways of doing that is going to be around policy and regulation, that they simply can't just offset what's in their real estate, that they need to be actually engaging with the tenants and engaging with their landlords to do something about it.
Thank you very much. Guido, I wanted to ask you as well. You mentioned briefly in your intervention that relationships are really at the center of what you're doing. And can you explain a little bit how maybe some of your best practices, how are you engaging, and how do you build these relationships and keep them going and gain that trust?
A good one. I think one of the things that you have to keep in mind with retail, especially what we do, is that as a landlord, you're responsible for building shell, and a tenant is essentially responsible, or in most cases, for everything that consumes energy once it's operating. So all the services, all the lighting, everything else. And I think, and this is also building on what Louise said, it's really about finding mutual relationships and mutual things where you can talk about. So it's not only about telling people what to do and punishing them for things that they don't do, but it's really talking about, okay, so what do we want to achieve? How can we achieve this? And what is the important role that you as a tenant play within this game as well? And I think that's the key thing. Get on board or speak to tenants as soon as possible. Don't wait until they essentially move in and then tell them that they need a green cleaning policy or anything like that, but really start at the outset. We have the first negotiations about leasing, about anything like that. Talk about what you want to achieve, what your sustainability goals are, and see how they could fit into that. And that's where we also see the biggest successes, where you really try to find mutual goals and targets and see how you can assist a tenant and build that trust on actually delivering that over time.
I think the other thing to kind of add is, the retail. So the one thing we know about retail is that it's changing, and there's a massive elephant in the room here that retail is really, really significantly challenged at the moment. So if you go to your leasing teams and say, I think I'd like to have an additional conversation with this tenant about whether they're not going to hit our standards, they're going to kind of question you about whether or not they're actually going to be able to do that for you, when all they really are trying to do is kind of keep tenants alive. So I think there is an opportunity. Someone put something in the chat about, in the questions about what I assume they mean is energy as a service and offering different things as a service. And I think we need to think as landlords about actually what it is that we're offering and the models we're offering. Leases are getting shorter. Investment in fit out becomes more challenging for tenants when leases are looking shorter. If we're trying to use service charge in order to landlords tend to forward fund projects in order to improve assets and then take that back through service charge, all of which works, but with a much shorter leasing profile, it becomes much more difficult. So are there opportunities for us to actually look quite differently at the model in which the tenant is just responsible for all of the energy they consume, and actually we start providing a menu of services for them that they can buy into and not buy into, and then take greater control over what's going on? I think there's quite a lot to play for around this in the sector at the moment.
There's definitely a lot, and we are not at a shortage of questions, but are running to a shortage of time. I'm going to ask Franco one question because I think it follows nicely what you were just mentioning, Louise, and then I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds to answer my final question, which I hope will please the audience. So Franco, just in response to Louise, because she was mentioning energy services, and this is precisely the thing that you're looking to fund. And I know that you recently did close a deal with a shopping center on doing a lighting for a parking, a big car park. And I just wanted to ask you a bit about your experience of you as the financier coming in. Where did you see the bottlenecks and what would you see needing to be improved? I think some of these companies who may be looking to engage with funds like yourself might be interested in knowing how they can, what should they be looking out for in order to make these things happen faster?
Sure, yes. So as I anticipated in my first statement, we typically do not have a direct relationship with the landlord, with the management company of the shopping mall. We are really working with partners who are basically approaching the landlord in order to propose energy efficiency solution. And so we don't have a direct feedback from the landlord why or why not certain things are being done. What we hear from our partners is a certain frustration about the fact that while there are opportunities there to reduce costs, to make the asset more valuable, to improve client experience, and do that without even taking financial resource, having to commit any financial resources, but really being able to rely on a third-party financing, which is very much linked to the saving, which is really going to be achieved. Even though there is such kind of a rationally thinking, a low-hanging fruit, a no-brainer to do something, they are quite often not able to get things done. They typically meet a lot of excitement at the top senior management of the asset manager, of the real estate companies. But when then it gets into trying to make things happen, they kind of face some walls, some barriers, and these projects or get delayed or are just simply not going to happen. So that's probably the biggest frustration and probably the biggest difficulty from an investor point of view, such as we are, which would finance such energy efficiency measure, to really understand why not more is being done, because the technologies are there, funding is there, the clients, the tenants are continuing to spend money or waste money in energy which they would not need to do. But even though all the ingredients are there, we are not able to create the right mix to basically get things moving. And that's basically probably the most frustrating things for the project partners. We have project developers we are working with, as well as obviously from an investor point of view, seeing the possibility to put money at work and not being able to do it is obviously frustrating as well.
Franco, would you say that it's at the middle management area where things become more challenging?
It could be. I mean, we see that in other sectors as well, not just in the shopping malls, that energy efficiency has never been a priority. It's always something you can do tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Quite often, the people responsible for these topics are obviously very much busy with running the day-to-day business, ensuring that the shopping mall works in the right way, fixing the immediate issues, and probably they simply do not have capacity to allocate their time to kind of more strategic initiatives such as energy efficiency projects, which obviously require data, as we have pointed out during the discussion, but then also time to follow the partner which is developing the technology solution to be implemented. That may be one reason, yes.
Thanks. We're getting close to time, but I just saw, Simona, you were nodding your head, and I think that you seem to have maybe a more positive outlook on this now. Do you have any comments that you would say to Franco on this?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was just saying, yes, that's one of the main problems we face, and that's the reason why I was speaking about people. How important it is to create the culture and the commitment in single people, not in the company in general, but specifically one-to-one, in the people who are there on the field, doing the actions day by day. And as Louise also told before, it's important to do and to create also the right tools to give to the tenants and to all the people who are working there, the right tools to accompany them, to give support and facilitate their work.
Thank you. We are over time. If everyone can bear with me, if this panelist can bear with me for a couple more minutes, I want to give everyone the chance to answer one question. You get 30 seconds each. And so the question is, and it's kind of, I'm trying to shorten a question that came from the audience, but there is not much time until we're at 2050. And 2030 is just around the corner. And we know at European level, we know the challenge that is ahead of us. So is the retail real estate sector ready for this challenge? Do you believe it's possible to become net zero carbon by 2050? And what is the one single most important priority for you in order to achieve that? The speed round, you can, Guido, why don't we start with you? And I'm just giving 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I think we're ready. Maybe we don't all believe we are ready, but I think we're ready. I think it's incredibly important that we just start doing things. So don't talk too much, don't wait too much, don't sit on your chair and think that 2030 or 2050 is still 10 years away or 20 years away. Just start doing things. We've made buildings all electric. We know that we can in the foreseeable future make buildings net zero carbon. So yes, it's possible. Let's just start cracking.
Thank you. I'm switching totally. Stephen, would you be able to give us your perspective?
Thanks a lot. I found it very dynamic and very, I would say, encouraging what all of you said. I think the important thing is to seize it as an opportunity to identify where a major improvement can be done, be the heating system, the solar on the roof, smartness of the building, to basically think actively about where there are certain shortcomings, where you identify in buildings wasteful practices, have a dialogue between tenants, the manager of the building, the owner, the financiers, and really then see how we first address the biggest problems and then work ourselves downwards. So, but really see it as an opportunity and not wait until tomorrow, next week, etc. But rather let's go for it together.
Thank you. Zsolt, the floor is yours. How would you like to answer this?
Thank you. Well, I think this is not a question about it can be done, but it's certainly something that should be done. And maybe not with the sole focus of climate mitigation, but also bringing in the wider environmental and social agenda as well. And I think I really love what Simona was saying, that this is not just a fancy add-on. It's something that should be embedded in the governance at all levels. So that is something then this climate neutrality goal becomes really a key driving factor of the strategy and the governance.
Thank you. Simona, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so just a quick sentence. Let's start together and always give feedback to the people, so they will understand that their simple action can create great results altogether right now.
Thank you. That was succinct. Franco.
I think we are at the point where we have to decide if we want to talk or do. I think we can discuss quite a long time if the objectives are too ambitious or not, but I think it's better use of the time to do things and make them happen. And that means basically starting yesterday rather than today. All the ingredients are there. I think it's very much, as Simona pointed out, something also very much linked to single people, to the culture, and we should, besides working on policies, making sure that peoples are also going to follow through and understand what is expected to them, and respectively what is the contribution they can do individually to make these things happen.
Thank you. Louise, the last one.
I think, yes, it is certainly possible. It's challenging. But I think I would echo what everybody said about we need to actually do stuff, and try not to get tripped up and slowed down by worrying about whether or not there's a business case, because there just is.
That was a great point. I'd like to invite Joost Koeman to come to the floor, who has very kindly actually put us in contact with so many of you. Joost, would you like to join us? And you've been working a lot with all of these stakeholders. What would you have to say as your closing remarks?
Yes, well, thank you, Caroline. Well, first of all, thank you to all the speakers and panelists today for I think a very interesting session. Lots of food for thought and lots of things to get working on immediately. Then a quick thanks to you, to BPIE and the Redevco Foundation for making this all possible, for allowing us as a young new trade association in the retail property area to be part of it, to support you with this. Quickly, when we started, I think we did a survey. One of the first things we did is a survey, and one of the main things that came out of that survey is that ESG is crucially important for our members. But at the same time, they said, well, we don't necessarily always know how to address this, how to meet this challenge, what to do. I think therefore the vision document created by this collaboration, I think therefore in that sense is very useful. It's going to be very helpful for all of us. I do think it's important at this moment to just acknowledge the challenge, obviously the challenge of of climate change, of becoming carbon neutral, carbon zero by 2050, of already meeting certain of the Europe's challenges by 2030. Louise, I think, put it very well, that obviously the COVID pandemic and its aftermath, although we're not really entirely out of it, is of course the big elephant in the room. It had a massive impact, financial impact, specifically on the retail sector. I think we have to acknowledge this. Unfortunately, that is a reality that we have to deal with. However, of course, immediately, turning it around into slightly more positive, we should not forget, obviously, that retail and retail property is thousands of years old. And therefore, it has had to innovate and meet challenges, throughout history, and has always done so. It's still there. It still plays a very important role in people's life everywhere across Europe. So I think that's that's something certainly not to forget. And I think we should therefore see this again as a new challenge that our sector has to meet and will meet. And as was already said by Clemens, I think really at the start of today's session, is that obviously beyond the risk, there is opportunity. Retail, of course, is the asset class that it renovates as fast as of all the entire real estate sector. Prior BPIE research has already proven that it's about 4% per year, which is 4 times faster than the average renovation for the other asset classes. Which means that going on that rate, that by 2030 already 60% of our existing assets will have been renovated. So I think that's that's obviously a very good and positive starting point, and it provides a good opportunity to build on. I think, of course, also even if investments might look daunting at the moment, obviously if you view it as an opportunity, then an amount of money invested today might seem huge, but of course you have potential significant benefits going forward, and once you have invested it. And last but certainly not least, the vision document, I think extremely important, as Zolt put it very well, not only for the large companies active in the sector, but certainly also for those middle-sized and small companies to have a starting point, to have a blueprint to start to work with. And that's certainly something that ECSP and I think the industry should really start to put to its good use. Because if there's one thing that I took away from today's session is that it's really important, I think, for all of us to start really the dialogue with local, national, European authorities at all levels, and to really try to shape the agenda going forward. I think that's really very important for us. And of course, as the saying goes there, if you're not sitting at the table, you're at the menu. So I think it's certainly a clear task ahead for me, for my members, I think for the entire sector, to really try to make that happen and to start to really put this vision document to good use.
Great. Thank you so much. I will leave it there. As I mentioned before, the slides and recording and the publication will be sent to your email within 24 hours of this webinar. However, our vision document has also just gone live as of now on our BPIE website. You can literally go to bpie.eu and you'll find it. So please read it, use it, share it with your colleagues that are working in retail real estate, and share it with tenants. Share it with your tenants. This is really meant to be an impetus to get people going and to start doing, as everyone has been saying so much. And there's nothing more that we want as BPIE than to see the change progressing. And we're very happy that we could be part of this. And just thank you again to all of the wonderful speakers today. Thank you to Redevco. And also to Joe, my colleague Joe Junkel on the back end, who has been making this webinar possible from the technical standpoint. It's greatly appreciated, and I wish you all a good day. Take care.
Thank you very much.
for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.